Good evening, students. Thank you for being early. We are waiting for the rest of your classmates, okay? We're going to begin very soon.
Okay, teacher.
Okay, awesome. We're going to begin because, it's important to keep an eye on the time. And well, as you're early, I don't want to, um, I don't want to appreciate how punctual you are. Okay, so please remind dear students that you have to have your cameras on while we are on class, okay? So let's begin. As you can remind, last week we had been learning about the reading section, which was a very interesting time. I enjoy very much. And now we're going to begin with the listening section, okay? The listening section, it's a very playful and very, refreshing uh, section in this exam because it always presents you like that opportunity to listen to what people are saying. It's super intriguing always to listen to what people are saying, and especially when it is in this university setting, it's interesting, in my opinion, to listen to what type of conversations can be found in that specific environment. So that is basically what you're gonna find in this section as you are going to be able to discover right now. Okay, so I'm gonna begin to share my screen with you, and we're gonna begin with this new section. Okay, so let's go with the presentation for the TOEFL listening section. Okay, so let's begin. As I say, this is a new section and it's going to be very well. This is not that challenging, but it is going to present its own little challenges. Okay, so let's see, what do we have here. So let's see some general aspects first. This section measures your ability to understand spoken English. Okay, very important. It includes listening for two types of, let us say, information in English. First of all, basic comprehension, very important. Pragmatic understanding, which basically means a speaker's attitude and degree of certainty. Okay, what is pragmatic is basically what is practical, what it is useful to understand in the situation itself, and it's also going to test, or it's going to measure your ability to understand, or it's going to measure your ability to connect and synthesize information. Okay, synthesizing information and connecting information, which is helpful in any university setting. Okay, so those are the abilities or the specific skills you are going to be evaluated in this case. Okay, evaluated about in this case. So now there are two types of listening items or materials or passages, however you want to name them, that you're going to receive in this specific section. Okay, what are those types of items? The first one is going to be lectures, and the second one is going to be conversations. Both are going to use campus-based language. As I say, it's something that you could find in a university, okay? Especially in an American university, right? Because maybe in South America or Central America, it's a little bit different. The university setting activities, but in American university, the conversations and lectures are very specific, and that type of material is the one that you're going to discover. And if you, for example, given that this is somehow the mood of the lectures or conversations you're going to be listening to, you could, for example, in order to practice, you could go and watch series that are taking place in university settings, because that way you're going to get familiarized with the conversations, with the specific topics and discussion on those settings or environments. I don't know, for example, Big Bang Theory, it's a series that sometimes has some episodes in the university. That type of conversation maybe could be productive, useful, and many others are not aware that much of series in universities. But if you know of some, maybe it's a very good idea to go and watch them. Okay. Now there are two types of. Oh, I mentioned that, but now specifically, what is going to be the organization, specifically the temporal organization and the content organization of those items? You're going to receive 3 to 4 lectures, each 3 to 5 minutes long, important, with 6 questions per lecture. Okay, I repeat, you're going to receive 3 to 4 lectures, each 3 to 5 minutes, most of the time 5 minutes long, and you're going to receive 6 questions per lecture. Okay, very important. Later, you're going to receive 2 to 3 conversations with 2 speakers, each 3 minutes long, with 5 questions per conversation. So as you can see, it's a very didactical and also very varied material, the one that you're going to receive. And well, please be aware of the different times that you're going to receive for for performing every specific item in this section. Now, something very important as well, you can take notes on any audio item throughout the test to help you answer questions. This is important. For example, in the reading section, we did not have the necessity of taking notes, nor in the, well, in the writing section, there is a necessity, specifically in the independent essay. We're gonna, with you specifically, we're gonna get into that later in the next weeks. Nevertheless, in the reading section, we didn't practice notes or taking notes because it was not necessary. There was not even time for doing so. But in this specific section, there is the necessity to take notes, and actually a great necessity to do so. Okay, so you have, and you're going to be able to do it. And don't worry, we're going to comment way more on that, because we're going to have a specific actually discussion on how to take notes. Okay, so please wait with me so that we can dive a little bit deeper into those waters. Now, you're going to have 41 to 57 minutes to complete the entire section. Very important, because well, it's it's a concern for all the students always. How much time are they going to have in order to complete the entire section? It's going to be from 41 to 7 minutes. And of course, the difference or the variation, it's because of the experimental version of the listening section, that it is basically the same as the reading section. As if you can remind, it was basically the case that sometimes ETS, in order to examine and to evaluate their own tests, they deliver some experimental passages and experimental conversations or paragraphs in the case of the reading section, in order to test how well designed and organized your exams are. And that is probably going to happen to you in this case, that if you are receiving this experimental extra material, you're gonna receive extra time, of course, and the section is going to long or last for 57 minutes, okay? But if you are taking the normal and general listening section, it is completely auditory, you're gonna have 41 minutes, okay? And remind please that always the experimental section is by any means significant to your score. Is not going to be evaluated, okay? So don't worry if you receive it, just complete it in order to help ETS, okay? As ETS is helping you too. So is there any question about the general aspects? Maybe you want me to repeat something in Spanish, to clarify something? Anything, maybe you have a question about this general aspects, or we can move on. Okay, I guess that there's no question. Please remind that for the ones that are entering to the class, please have your cameras on, very important, so we can continue, okay? So now, we're gonna have a discussion about listening, and specifically about the activity to take notes on the listening section, okay? So that's the reason why I named this specific slide and series of slides, listening notes, 101, okay? So we're gonna discuss that, how to take notes appropriately, etc. So, okay, I want to clarify first that actually there's no like a definite technique or strategy to take notes. Obviously, well, as I know and as you are aware as well, every single person is different, and what works for me maybe does not work for you, but I'm gonna give you right now some elements, some general considerations that you should definitely apply, because they are super general but are actually very useful, okay? But nevertheless, the strategy or the technique itself, I think you are gonna be able to discover which one or what of the incredible large spectrum of different techniques that are out there is gonna be appropriate for you. So please, while you're practicing, you're gonna discover what suits you the most and use that, because, well, definitely if you are able to adapt yourself to that and remind with that type of notes, you should definitely use that strategy, okay? But you're gonna discover that with practice. Now, my first recommendation to begin with, don't forget that all the sheets of papers and pencils you will need to take your notes will be provided to you by your test center. Very important. Some people are always very worried and preoccupied about, you know, not being able to enter to the test center with sheets of papers to take their notes on. And actually that is not a problem, because they are actually not allowed to enter to the room where you're going to take your exam, right, where the computers are located, etc. You're not going to be allowed to enter with sheets of papers. No, I mean, you're not going to be able to get in with any type of material. As I say, all the papers, all the pencils, maybe erasers, whatever you're going to need, the test center is going to provide you with that, and it has no extra cost. That is included on the fees that you're going to pay in order to take the exam at that specific test center you're going to choose, right? If you are taking the IBT version, this is what is going to happen. The IBT version is the internet-based test in or at a test center. So, well, just in case, you must know, as I said, you are not requested nor allowed to bring with you any sheet of paper. So everything, all the material you're going to need, they're going to give it to you while you are in your test center. Now, if you're taking the home IBT edition of the listening section, very important, you can use one of these elements in order to take your notes, okay? Just if you're taking the home IBT edition, that is to say the one that you take from your home. You could use, for example, one small desktop whiteboard with erasable marker no pencil or pen in order to take your notes, or you could use one sheet of paper inside a transparent sheet protector with erasable marker. Basically, what they are doing through this specific instructions and prohibitions actually of not using when you are taking the home IBT edition is prohibiting you from having the record of your own notes and how you perceive maybe the section or your own observations of the section or the material maybe that you have received. They don't want you to keep it. Actually, if you're taking the IBT edition, they are going to ask you to give them back the sheets of papers that you have utilized while giving your exam and taking your notes. Okay, you're not going to be able to take those sheets of papers to your home. I think, well, this secrecy or this particular mood or attitude of ETS is maybe because they don't want nobody to know very much about the specific or the official content of the real exams, of the actual exams. Well, that is my theory, but as I can say, or well, everything that I'm allowed to say, or as much as I can say, is basically, you are not, if you're taking the home version, you're not going to be the opportunity to save your material, your papers where you have written on, because everything it's always going to like present you the necessity of erasing, right? And if you are taking the normal IBT version, you're not going to be able to take your notes to your home. Okay, so but be aware of all these situations. Okay. Now, second, what you can do to save time and maintain order is to prepare your sheet with some points marking the beginning of each note. So I explain. While you are in the IBT normal version at the test center, any test center you have chosen, you are going to request one of the staff members to give you a sheet of paper and materials, etc., in order to take your notes, right? So when you receive your paper, what you can do, for example, as you can see here in the picture, is to mark some points throughout the entire document, throughout the entire paper, in order for you to know where the beginning of each of your notes is. Because when you know where the beginning is, once you are presented with the necessity of reviewing your notes, you are going to know where your notes begin. As it would not be the case if you begin to write whatever you listen to while you are listening, and your notes are just going to be a chaos, right? Not a good idea. If you have everything organized, following this strategy that I used myself when I was taking the exam, and I had, well, actually this section, as a matter of commenting a little bit with you, this section is the one in which I had the higher score, well, in my test itself. And well, I got 29 in this section. And actually, I think it was very much because I practiced it a lot, because I had troubles with it at the beginning. But well, following this strategy, I could have everything organized. And well, if you follow this as a matter of order and organization, I think that it's going to be helpful. Okay, so another thing that I can mention is try not to be very extensive, okay, with any of your notes. Write down just general ideas as concisely as you can. Remind this phrase, please, very much pay attention. You are not listening to write. You are writing to remind what you have listened. I'm going to repeat that. You are not listening to write. You are writing to remind what you have listened. Everything you write on your paper is not going to be punctuated. It's not going to be scored, okay? Basically, everything you have on your paper is just because you want to remind what you have listened, and what you have listened and remind is what is valuable to you, not what you have written, okay? So don't extend yourself very much, writing everything and trying to make it beautiful or something. It's not necessary. Actually, your notes must be your last concern. They are important, but they must be your last concern. What you have to be concerned about is reminding, okay? You are writing to remind what you have listened. Third recommendation, you should write down only info words, okay? Why do I mean by this? And leave out function words. Why do I mean by info words? Info words are meaningful words or information words that contain significance, such as, for example, people, places, actions, and descriptions. You're going to understand them better right now. Function words, on the other hand, are things like prepositions, articles, auxiliary verbs, modals, which provide almost no useful information about the material. Okay, so let's look at an example here on the right side of my screen. You're going to see a box and there are some sentences, and below those sentences, there are some examples of which of those words mentioned there. Imagine you are listening to that sentence in your section. Which of those words would be information words, the one that I think and I recommend you to write down, okay? For example, let's read. It says, insomnia, a consistent difficulty in falling or staying asleep, is the most common of the sleep disorders, okay? So it's talking about insomnia. If you want to summarize and write down a note about that specific sentence, okay, imagine that you're listening to that in your section, you could write, for example, a note like this: insomnia, common disorder, right? Because these words are words conveying and expressing information like actual information. If you read, for example, is, in, a, words like that, or, for example, you're not really helping you to understand anything, because those are function words, but they are not information words. Information words are the one conveying, transmitting data. Okay, so you want to make sure to remind data, because as you're going to be able to see once we get into the types of questions for this section, I would say that most of the questions are going to be about information of the different lectures or conversations you are going to listen to, not about grammar. Okay, so you don't want to be super specific about grammar, but remind data. Okay, so please try to write down the information words. Let's look at another example. It is not uncommon for people suffering from insomnia to experience increased levels of anxiety about their inability to fall asleep. You could write, for example, the information words as follows: more anxiety falling asleep. What are you trying to remind? You're reminding that, as it is said in your lecture, when you have insomnia, when you suffer from insomnia, you experiment troubles and anxiety by falling asleep, and you can write down just those words so that you remind that, right? So I think the difference is very obvious. Finally, try to write abbreviated words. Very important. I repeat, try to write abbreviated words, okay? So you remember, for example, the difference between consonants and vowels? Vowels consist of letters, for example, A, E, I, O, and U, sometimes Y. Consonants are all the other letters, B, C, D, F, and so on. Here's the interesting part. Vowels are so common, both in Spanish and English actually, that you could write a word without any of its vowels and still understand the meaning. Okay, so when you are writing down your notes, it's not necessary for you to write the entire word, specific, and especially if the word's long, right? If the longer the word is, it's actually going to take you more time to write it down, and maybe you're going to lose some of the details on the listening, on the listening material you're listening to, or the lecture, the conversation, whatever, and you're going to lose a detail just because you're concentrated in writing a complete, very long word. But what you can do is to abbreviate the words you're writing while taking your notes by, for example, eliminating the vowels, by obviating the vowels. For example, look at some illustrations. Sleep could be written as SLP, symptoms as SMPTMS, depression as DPRSM, right? So, and obviously, if you think that one word is not going to be able, you're not going to be able to recognize a word without all its vowels, obviously you can write, right? You can throw in a vowel in order to remind it. For example, anxiety, AMXTY, create, CRETE, whatever. Okay, so these are my recommendations. As you can see, these are not strategies. These are just axioms, general elements that you can remind. Okay, is there any question until this point about everything we have talked about? Any question? Maybe you want to clarify something, you want me to explain something in Spanish, maybe something you want to clarify? Or is it clear until this point? Okay, awesome. Great. So now, as it is our custom, actually, types of questions you will find in this section. As we were practicing in the reading section, we are now going to see what are the types of questions you can rationally wait for in this section. Let's see. The first one is the TOEFL listening main idea question. okay? So every listening sample will begin in the same way, okay? With a main idea question. These questions ask you to identify the main point of the lecture or conversation. They usually take one of the following forms. Pay attention. It could be, what is the main idea of the lecture? What subject is the professor mainly discussing? What was the conversation mainly about? That is the wording of this type of question. So if you receive a question similar in wording to these specific examples I'm giving you here, I think you should recognize easily that this is a main idea question. Now, we're gonna watch a video in order to look at an example of this specific type of question, and obviously we're going to listen, right? So we're gonna listen to a entire lecture. This is actually a very good opportunity for you to practice your notes. Take a sheet of paper, and while we are listening to this lecture, we're going to listen right now. Please take your notes on the entire lecture, and after we have finished to listen to this specific lecture, we're gonna concentrate on the specific type of question we are talking about right now. Okay, so I'm gonna begin. Please take your sheets of paper, and if you're ready, we're going to begin. Okay, so take your notes, and we begin now.
How many of you have heard of Alessandro de...
You're able to listen to, right? Could somebody tell me?
Yes, we are listening.
Okay, awesome. So let's go.
How many of you have heard of Alessandro de Mariano Giovanni Filippi? No? Nobody? Well, let me put it this way. How many of you are familiar with the work of an artist called Sandro Botticelli, or even just Botticelli? Yeah, that's what I thought. It's definitely an easier name to remember. But a lot of you might also be surprised to learn that this artist, who we know so well, really fell out of favor from shortly after the Renaissance until the late 19th century. That's right, it's really only within the past 150 years that Botticelli's work has returned to popularity. And yet within that time, his name, well, his alias, has become synonymous with a kind of grace and beauty that characterizes the best of Renaissance painting. Patronized by the famous Medici family, Botticelli was celebrated during his lifetime for using these qualities of grace and beauty in his artwork. And while his earliest paintings often used religious subject matter, well, we've seen this throughout the course, haven't we, how common this was? These aren't the works that are most celebrated today. In fact, let me ask you, what are the paintings that you most associate with Botticelli? If you're thinking The Birth of Venus, you're definitely not alone. The Birth of Venus is definitely one of Botticelli's better-known works. His masterpiece, Primavera, was painted 3 years earlier. That's another one that you might know. And it was done in the same vein as The Birth of Venus. Primavera means spring in Italian, and here's a slide of the painting up on the board. These are works that didn't rely entirely on the iconography of the Catholic Church. While we do see some holdovers from Botticelli's earlier works, the main subjects of these paintings go back to traditions of gods and goddesses. Note the extensive use of nature as a metaphor, in addition to the nudity of some of the figures, or the skimpy clothes used to cover them. Actually, Botticelli was extremely religious and would end up painting work for churches and cathedrals, using Catholic iconography for the rest of his life. The Madonna and Child, for example, was a popular subject. Because of the popularity of his work, it's kind of strange that he fell out of favor. His paintings were in churches, chapels, and villas all over Italy. But in 1502, almost a decade before he died in 1510, Botticelli was already disappearing from the public eye. Even though he had painted frescoes in the Sistine Chapel, Botticelli's work was commonly overlooked in favor of that of his neighboring artist, Michelangelo. It took almost 3 centuries before an English collector, William Young Otley, bought a Botticelli in Italy and brought it back to England in 1799. Even then, the painting wasn't exhibited in public for almost another 60 years, when its next owner, William Fuller Maitland, lent it to an Art Treasures exhibition in 1856. There, more than 1 million viewers saw it, and art historians began to take note. Some of these historians had already taken an interest in Botticelli's Sistine Chapel frescoes, and his reputation again began to blossom. By the end of the century, Botticelli's works had been extensively admired. The pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood found inspiration in them. The first monograph, or book of paintings, by the artist was published in 1893. Botticelli had the last laugh. In the first 20 years of the 20th century, more books were written about his art than about the art of any other painter, dead or alive. It just goes to show you, the art world is ruled by trends. Just because a particular artist isn't popular at a given moment, it doesn't mean that there's no value in his or her work, or that it won't be popular once more, even if it does take 3 centuries.
Okay, awesome. So, now that we have listened to that lecture, let's see how this main idea question would look like. Okay, so the question would be more or less something like this. What is the main point of the professor's lecture? Okay, for example, well, in this case, you can see on the left side of my screen already the response. Nevertheless, let's see how what the different options in order to respond to questions are. Option A would be, people today should know more about the different style that Botticelli used. B could be, Botticelli's career exemplifies certain historical tendencies of the art world. C, we can never know the artists who might be popular in the future. And C, Botticelli's religious paintings were more important than his paintings that depicted non-religious subjects. Okay, those are the possible answers. So the answer is B in this case. Why? The professor's main point is that Botticelli's work shows that some artists fall in and out of popularity over time. If you missed this, it might have been because you stopped listening towards the end of the lecture. A good reminder to stay alert, though it may be hard for a whole thing. But in this case, as you're going to be able to see here in my recommendations for this type of question, the speaker herself stated what the main idea of all the entire lecture she gave was. In other cases, she's not going to directly state it, but nevertheless, even if she had not stated the main idea in this specific lecture, if you look at the entire lecture she gave or she delivered, you're going to notice that this idea of artists falling in, falling out in the sense of being popular at some point and not so popular, but somehow unknown in a specific time in history is a common phenomenon. And she expressed that by saying, for example, at the beginning, how it was that at the beginning, nobody knew about him, but later he was like a representation of the beauty and the delicacy of the Renaissance time. At the beginning, right at the beginning, she said that, and more or less is marking, right? The idea of the pretension that the author or the speaker had. Now, what are my recommendations? In order to correctly choose your answers, you must be very precise in choosing only those answers conveying the central or main ideas of the passage, not those which began it. Okay, important. The things or the topics or the elements beginning the lecture are not the central ideas, yes or yes. It doesn't mean that because they begin the entire lecture, they are the central ideas. No, not those that end the passage either, nor the most unperceivable details. Okay, what is the main idea? The main idea or the main ideas are the ones that frame all the discussions and data. Okay, imagine that the main ideas are like a circle, and everything that is within the circle, it's like the different topics or elements that complement the main idea. But the main idea is what frames the entire lecture, in the sense that it is framing, it is reuniting all the other elements and organizing them and connecting them. But there is a main idea, right? What frames, what as I say, what connects everything, right? So imagine that it is a circle framing. It's like it is enclosing all the different information, opinions, data, everything that is offered. There is something connecting it with the rest of the different elements. And that is the framing idea and the main idea, okay? That is a great answer. So don't let yourself to be deceived by some answers presenting textual references from the passage. Many answers actually may contain material that is indeed in the passage, but you should ask yourself if that was only a contingent detail or the actual main idea. A contingent detail is something you can dispense with, algo de lo que se puede prescindir. That is a contingent detail. And many of these answers, if you look at it, are contingent details. Okay? Actually, there is a part of the lecture where the professor talks about how religious paintings of Botticelli were actually more important or representative of his art than his painting on, let us say, worldly or secular topics. Nevertheless, that is a contingent detail because it is simply something you could dispense with and you would still have all the other elements of the lecture connected. That is not the main idea. In some cases, the speaker himself will identify the main idea. So pay attention to the entire, okay, to the entire lecture. That was the case in our precise example. The professor herself offered the framing idea, or what somehow, as I said, enclosed the reason of her entire lecture, what enclosed and connected and guided and directed everything. She said that the reason why she talked about Botticelli's life and she began to say all this data and information was because she wanted them to identify that some artists may be unknown for some time, but that is not perpetual. Maybe they're going to be super famous in the future. Great, that is possible. There's a tendency in art. That is the main idea, okay? And as I say, that is even noticeable if the speaker does not mention it particularly or specifically. That is noticeable. You can perceive that throughout the entire lecture. You could pay attention to the framing, as I say, to the framing sentences, some expressions conveying that, directing all the information. As at the beginning, for example, she said something like, as I said, right, the Renaissance was identified with this painter Botticelli, with all its beauty and with all its grace. Nevertheless, it wasn't the case at the beginning, as she said, right in the first part of her lecture, okay? So from that point, you could have maybe began to theorize that was the main idea, okay? But is there any question about this specific type of question, or is it clear? What is the main idea? Any question? No question? Okay, awesome. So we're going to move on to the TOEFL listening function question, which is the second type of question in this specific section. Okay, so let's go. TOEFL listening function question. The TOEFL listening function questions will test your ability to understand why a certain idea or argument or sentence, in this case, I add, has been used in the passage. They will ask you to draw conclusions about the information that has been spoken in the passage. The questions will replay a segment of the recording that contains the topic of the question, and then we'll replay just the topic. You're going to understand that in a minute. Please give me the opportunity to show you. But this is basically how the question is structured, okay? Now, again, we're going to listen to an example of this type of question, and we're going to listen to another lecture. This is very practical, actually. Okay, so we're going to listen, and please take notes again so that we can practice this way more, and you're going to be able to, you're going to be well practiced, and that is going to help you a lot. Those, okay, 12 fixed 56 is our lecture. 12 fixed, okay. Now,
class.
Listen to this. Okay, we're gonna have here a announce. Listen to the announce first. Okay. You know, the sad
when
part
I was a
of not
student,
having.
I'd write long essays that I'd work on for days. But now I'm writing short.
But actually,
Listen.
Grammarly is great. Actually, I used to utilize that software when I was writing down some essays for some applications that I did some time ago. Okay, doesn't matter. So now we're going to listen to this lecture, and then we're going to practice that specific question that is our function question. I'm going to stop the lecture at the point I know is going to be sufficient or enough for us to understand the question. So this is not going to be complete, but anyways, take notes until the point I stop, okay? So let's go. Oh, Emma, I did something wrong. Okay, again, so please listen to it and let's go.
Class.
I want to continue our discussion about whales. Specifically today, I want to talk about whale migration. Why whales head south for the winter? Or really, why whales in the cold water of the northern hemisphere head south for the winter. Now, not all kinds of whales migrate, but most baleen whales do. And interestingly enough, we still don't really know why the baleen whales migrate. We do have several theories, however, which I'll discuss today. Can anybody name one reason why baleen whales might migrate south to the warm tropical water?
For food? You know, the whales move to warmer water in order to find a good area to feed?
Good guess. That should be an obvious reason. After all, most animals that migrate do so for the purpose of finding food. But that doesn't seem to be the case with baleen whales. To understand why, you need to know something about water temperature. There are a lot of technical reasons that I'm not going to go into right now. But let's just say that nutrients don't rise to the surface of tropical water like they do in other kinds of water.
Okay, until that point. Now, you want to listen to the type of question, okay? There is a question about that specific, about something that we have already listened to in the lecture until this point. And now you're going to be able to identify this question very easily. Let me remind, where's the minute? It's 1911. Okay, so now listen to the question. Listen.
When I was a student, I'd write long essays that I'd work on for days, but now I'm writing...
These fellows are hungry.
Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
To understand why, you need to know something about water temperature. There are a lot of technical reasons that I'm not going to go into right now. But let's just say that nutrients don't rise to the surface of tropical water like they do in other kinds of water.
What does the professor mean when she says this?
There are a lot of technical reasons that I'm not going to go into right now.
Okay. Now, as you can see, and as I was mentioning at the beginning of the, at the beginning of the specific question we are talking about right now, this question type is going to present you the advantage or the benefit of letting you to listen again to a specific sentence that is actually the sentence you are going to be asked about, okay? And you're not just going to listen to the sentence itself. You're going to listen first to the entire context of the sentence and later to the sentence itself. And later you're going to be asked about something regarding that specific sentence. That is to say, the second sentence we just heard, okay? Now, before we comment a little bit and before we look for the correct answer, I'm going to give you my recommendations, okay, for the section and how to respond and how to approach. Let's see. So recommendations for the function questions. To effectively respond, to this type of question, you must ask yourself, what effect, okay, pay attention, what effect does the alluded portion have over the context or topic? Again, what effect does the alluded portion or the sentence have over the context or topic? It might, for example, initiate, it might correct, it might imply, redirect, or rhetorically postulate something. When it rhetorically postulates something, it is because it's trying to make a point. It's trying to point out to something specific, to some, maybe to some irony or something like that. I don't know, but just in case it's rhetorical. Now, pay attention to the alluded portion's mode. It could be interrogative, exclamative, subjunctive, indicative, and so forth, okay? So We're going to listen again to the question, and later I'm going to tell you how to respond, or what would be the correct answer in this case. Let's listen again to the question. But as you can see, it's basically always going to ask you about what effect is the specific sentence they are giving you, what effect that specific sentence have over the context or over the topic. In this case, it's over the context. Why is the professor mentioning this? What effect does the sentence the professor is mentioning have over the entire context of her sentence? Okay, so listen again and try to remind that it is asking you about the effect. Okay, so let's listen.
Listen again to part of the lecture, then answer the question.
To understand why, you need to know something about water temperature. There are a lot of technical reasons that I'm not going to go into right now. But let's just say that nutrients don't rise to the surface of tropical water like they do in other kinds of water.
What does the professor mean when she says this?
Okay. He's saying, what does the professor mean when she say this? It is exactly the same as asking, what effect does the sentence the professor is giving have? What is she pretending to cause? What is she pretending to make with that? What effect is she pretending to make with this sentence? What effect does she want to cause in her audience? That's the reason why I suggested you to ask yourself what effect that this specific sentence have over the context, because the professor is pretending to make an effect, to cause something to her audience to understand. Okay, that is the question. That is the equivalent of the question. That is what the question means. Now, listen to the specific sentence we are asked about.
There are a lot of technical reasons that I'm not going to go into right now.
Okay, that is the sentence. What effect does she pretend to cause with that sentence in the context? What effect does she pretend to cause with that sentence to her audience? That is the question. As you can see, that's the reason why I wrote here. Always ask yourself, what effect does the alluded portion have over the context or topic? Okay, so now let's try to respond. Does somebody have an idea? Maybe any volunteer want to? Yeah.
I could say the letter B. She will discuss only what is relevant to her main point.
Okay. Okay. Any other response? Somebody else? Okay, doesn't matter. Actually, you're right, Carlos. Great. Very good. Why? Let's think why. So remind that the context, because as you could notice, you're listening to two different audios, right? First, you're listening to the entire context of the sentence, and later you are listening to the sentence itself and alone. The reason why they present to the context is because they want you to remind what was the lecture about. If you remind the lecture until the point we listened to it, was about how some whales make some migrations to the south, and the professor is asking for her students to make some theories, to theorize about what possible causes could they find for these whales to go and make their migrations to the south rather than going to any other place in the world. And one student says, well, maybe it's because they want to get food. And the professor says, well, that is an imaginable answer. That is, rational to believe. But nevertheless, it's not the case. And later she explains to him why is it that theory is not correct. And she says, there are a lot of technical details I could get into, but I'm not going to discuss them. And she says later, well, the thing that you have to know is this and this circumstances about the tropical waters, etc., etc. So what effect does she want to cause in her student? Simply, she is saying basically, she's just going to discuss what is relevant to her main point. There are a lot of technical details she could talk about, a lot of things she could go deeper into, but she will not. Why? Because there are a lot of things, but she just wants her students to know about this. That is the effect she wants to cause. Is it clear? Or maybe you want me to repeat it in Spanish? Please tell me now if it is clear what the reasoning is. What effects is she causing? She wants her students to understand, well, guys, there are a lot of things we could talk about, but I'm just gonna focus on this. You must know that temperatures, blah, 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 blah. And she says other things. Is it clear? Maybe somebody did not understand. Please tell me. Maybe you want me to repeat it in Spanish. I'll do it gladly. Any question?
Could you repeat it, please?
Yeah, sure. What specifically you didn't understand?
No, what happened is that I go out and I didn't listen.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The last part.
Okay. So basically, I was examining or reviewing why I said that the answer B is the correct answer. I say the correct answer is B, and it's actually B. I have checked it out. But the correct answer is B, because if you remind, the lecture we listened to was about some whales that made their migrations to the South American waters. And the professor says, well, students, I want you to theorize about what possible causes could you find in order to explain what is it that these whales living in the North waters migrate to the South waters. And one student proposes and says, maybe teachers, because these whales want to find food. And the professor responds, well, that's possible, but nevertheless, it's not the case. And she says, there are a lot of technical details we could get into. But what you have to know is that for this specific waters and temperatures and blah, 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 then it continues. So why is it that she's saying that there are a lot of technical details we could get into? The reason she's saying that, or the effect she's expecting her sentence to cause, is her students to know that there are a lot of things that she could talk about, right? Well, that is why she's saying there are a lot of technical details. But she's going to discuss only what is relevant to her main point. What is relevant to her main point? Well, she mentions here, listen to.
Technical reasons that I'm not going to go into right now. But let's just say that nutrients don't rise to the surface of tropical water like they do.
That is what is relevant to her point. There are a lot of things she could have said, but she's just saying this. The temperatures, blah, 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 blah. That is what she's going to talk about, because that is relevant. Okay? Now it's clear? You understood why I said this the correct response? Yeah, or maybe you want me to repeat it in Spanish, or is it clear now? You listen?
Yes, it's clear.
All right, awesome. Okay, great. So that's it. If there are no more questions, we're going to stop there. As you can see, it's very interesting. It's going to help you. It's going to require you to reason a lot. But if you follow my recommendation, thinking what effect does she pretend to cause in her audience in the context, you're going to make it very good. Okay, so I'm going to launch the poll. There's traditional, and I'm going to take as well the assistance, something that I did not do. So please, while you are responding to the poll, I'm going to spell your names, and if you are here, say present, okay? Alcoba Rivero, Maria Fernanda. Okay, it's not here. Caballero Carlos Lopez.
I'm here, teacher.
Right, awesome. Callejas Yañez, Marinés Genesis. Callejas Yañez, okay, it's not here. Guaroto Conisdia Carolina.
Here.
All right, awesome.
Present.
Yeah, don't worry. Miño Marcillo Yandira Lisette or Lisette. All right, awesome, thank you. Morales Ugarte Boni.
Here.
Okay, awesome. All right, so we have only 2 absences. This is great. Okay, there's somebody who is lacking to respond. Please, I need everyone to respond to the poll. If you have not done it, please do it so we can finish the class. All right. Okay, that's great. Everybody responded? Right, I guess. Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna end then the poll. And well, thank you very much for your presence today. If you have any questions throughout tomorrow, tell me and I'm gonna gladly help you. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. See ya.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye, teachers.
Bye bye.